Hello everybody, my name is Magnus Frampton, I'm from the University of Vechta. This is one of a series of presentations designed for students in the programme Social Work in Germany. I'm hoping that it may from time to time be stumbled upon people, maybe from the Anglo-Saxon countries, interested in a brief introduction to social pedagogy. I want to consider it, what is this discipline and what does it mean for German social work? Lovely. I think my interest really is the whole idea of comparative social work. Being based in Germany, but being familiar with Anglo-Saxon social work, I'm fascinated in why social work is different in different places. And I think one explanation for national differences in social work is the disciplines that a country's social work draws from. Because social work is always a mixed bag, isn't it? It's always dipping into this discipline here, learning from this discipline here. And it really is a hodgepodge of different disciplinary influences. And this is my first exercise for you students. Social work services, they're different in each and every country. The differences are down to many factors. One is the existence of particular disciplines which social work draws from. So my first question, students, for you to discuss with your partner, which are the Bezügsdiszipline, the disciplines that social work draws on, and which is the light discipline for social work in Germany, which are, and also at the same time, which aren't? Are there any disciplines that you may expect to have an influence, but in actual fact, don't at all? Pause here, natter with your partner on the phone or on your favourite conferencing website. What did you come up with? Maybe it's easier for me to answer the second question first. What subjects aren't the light discipline? Well, quite clearly it's worth stressing it's not medicine. And if you're German, you might say, why on earth should it be? But it's worth noting that medicine has had an extraordinary influence on Anglo-Saxon social work. Medicine has shaped the language of social work. It's accompanied the social work profession through the last 100 years. You know, from social diagnosis, you've got your psychodynamic social work of the 1950s, you've got care management, case management from the 1980s, from the 1990s, you've got evidence-based practice. You know, it's all over our theory, all over our concepts in the Anglo-Saxon countries. And that's not really the case in Germany. All of those movements I've just cited would have had an influence in social work in Germany, but very much as foreign imports. You know, that's not the true heart, sort of heart of German social work. What are key German Bezügsdiszipline? Which ones does it draw from? If you're a student, you'll be taking modules in sociology or psychology. That's part of your social work training, typically in the first few semesters. Good. Nonetheless, it's easy to overstate those disciplines' influence on social work. Psychology, for example, in the Anglo-Saxon countries, you've got the clinical social worker, a practitioner working with psychology, with clinical psychology and other forms of psychology every day of their practice. And that profession is less well established in Germany. It's even quite hard to translate the idea of the mental health social worker or the idea of the clinical social worker. So yes, sociology and psychology, key disciplines, but maybe less significant than they are elsewhere. Again, we can say the same thing for law. Law is really, really important. It's a big part of social workers training in Germany as well as elsewhere. I did a whole bunch of modules in it. Almost a whole semester of my training was law modules. Good. On the other hand, it's not especially popular with students. And it's fascinating that of the really famous social work thinkers in Germany, the people who are really often cited, few actually come from a law background. I don't know why not, but it seems to be an interesting pattern that we'll see here. So law is important, but not the light discipline. So where is the heart of German social work? Where can we find it? I think it's undoubtedly in the area of pedagogy. Pedagogy, Germans might say Erziehungswissenschaft, apparently it means the same thing. And of course, thinking of pedagogy leads us to social pedagogy, our topic today. So that's my suggestion here. This is not just an important discipline for social work. In a sense, it's the important discipline for social work in Germany. Good. So this is the topic of our talk. The next step is clear, isn't it? Students, I want you to define it. Pause this video, scratch your heads, natter with your partner, what is social pedagogy exactly? Can you, off the top of your head, put down a sentence or two? What are your thoughts? Pause here, think about that. Unpause here. Yeah, what definitions have I found? Which ones can I give you? I'm not being creative. I'm looking in the usual places. Let's go straight onto the Duden online dictionary. Pop in Sozialpädagogik. We've got this. Now, obviously it's in German, the original. I've translated it into English here. Social pedagogy is the branch of pedagogy dealing with the raising of individuals, for the community and for social responsibility outside of school and family. Really, really interesting definition, this. Branch of pedagogy dealing with the raising of individuals. I should note, raising is a bit of a compromise translation. It's a bit of an awkward translation. The original was, of course, Erziehung. A little bit hard to translate in this context. Raising is my best attempt. I've noted that elsewhere, Erziehung is translated as education in the broadest sense of the word. Maybe that would even improve our Duden definition here. Good. Raising of individuals for the community, so for life in their society, and for social responsibility. So a Brit and American might say, oh, so this is about citizenship then. And I think it is. I think it really is. We also have interesting last words here. We're not talking about the education that happens in school. This is outside of school and also outside of family. So it's not informal, but maybe we're thinking it's formal. Isn't that interesting? So a short but a rich Duden definition there. And again, I invite you to pause here, just to let that definition sink in, reread it one more time, have a brief natter with your partner. Other definitions, I was being lazy. I thought, hey, I wonder what Wikipedia is saying. And once again, I've translated it. I've used the German Wikipedia, not the English one. I find the German definition nice and authentic. Translated back into English, so to say. Social pedagogy describes a branch of the science, or the disciplines, of child raising, education, and welfare state intervention. Isn't that interesting? So it's about child raising, it's about education, but it's also about social policy. Social pedagogy attempts to strengthen the sense of responsibility of the individual, and thus their independent interactions in general life situations in society. So a similar idea to our last one, it's about preparing the person, preparing the individual for a participative existence, a participative life in our society. And it continues, I'm shortening it slightly. It enables the individual to participate in societal and public life. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, Wikipedia is producing interesting ideas here. Good. Moving over the channel to the UK, it's interesting to look at the headings or the titles of books. I've got a couple of lovely books here that I've been using to prepare this presentation. Here's one here, the subheading from Cameron and Moss's edited collection of papers, Where Care and Education Meet. Isn't that lovely? And I've got another book I like, this one from a Norwegian-based author, Social Pedagogy, Heart and Head. So he's obviously alluding to a Swiss idea, Pestalozzi's idea here, pedagogy, head, heart, and hand, or hands. So there's other, nice phrases that help us pin down what social pedagogy is. Maybe you even came up with similar expressions yourself. Good. It's really interesting to reflect on the current UK interest in social pedagogy. I was born in Britain and I've lived in Germany for about 20 years. When I came to Germany, there was no English word for social pedagogy. There really wasn't a translation. And if we would have talked about it back then in the UK, I don't think anybody would have actually understood what you were trying to describe. And this is summarized in a 2003 paper by Hämäläinen, the Finnish author, Juha Hämäläinen. He describes social pedagogy as being a virtually unknown concept and practice within the Anglo-Saxon world. Virtually unknown. Leading to my next question, natter with your neighbour, pause here, natter with your neighbour, with your partner on the phone. unknown. How come? How come the Brits didn't know about this rich and fascinating discipline that we've had in many European countries, for a couple of 100 years? How come? How come? There's no clever answer here. I think that answer is actually really, really stupid, but I'm convinced this is a lost in translation question. The only reason for me is linguistic. Yes, this is a well-established profession in countries like Germany, with 1.5 centuries of theory or more, actually. But the important point is those books which you have to read, those papers which you have to read, they're all written in continental European languages. They're written in German, they're written in the Nordic languages, they're not written in English. Okay, this is really a discipline where almost all of the key thinkers are non-English native speakers. So the Brits, the Americans, didn't have access to the literature, and indeed, even this concept, Sozialpädagogik, the German would say, the Danes would say something similar. How do we translate that? Social education was often the translation used when I came to Germany. But that subject is actually something quite different in the UK. That's a school subject, and this is clearly a non-school activity. So there really was a lot of lost in translation. There was confusion, which bad translations didn't help. And for me, that's the only reason why it didn't come to the UK earlier. Good. The good news is it really is completely the opposite today. Not only do Brits now understand social pedagogy well, they're really celebrating it. You can study the subject, you can study it at degree level, you can do bachelor's and master's. I checked a few moments ago, there's something like 6, 7, 8 courses at bachelor's or master's level in the UK. So it really is establishing itself with energy quickly. Leading to my next question, discuss with your partner, why? Why do you think the situation changed? Why are now the Brits really into this discipline of social pedagogy? What are the Brits getting from it now? Pause here, natter with your partner. What did you come up with? I think there's a whole bunch of reasons. My instincts are that it had a lot to do with the idea of childcare workers. I'm thinking of residential children's home, but also early education. There's so much that they can get from this literature. And in the UK, those people really were quite underqualified in the past. So as part of a professionalization drive in all of these professions related to working with smaller children. UK social workers also, they've long had a skill deficit in direct work with clients. So British social workers really been slipping into this idea of case management or care management. The social worker is something like an organizer. The social work relationship has really suffered over the course of a number of decades. And certainly by the turn of the century, by the early 2000s, I think a lot of social workers would have felt they didn't have enough skills in doing direct work. Direct work in general with clients, but in particular with children. If you have to sit on the carpet with a child and draw pictures or do playing activities, not all social workers would have felt comfortable with that. And obviously social pedagogy promises us a lot for helping that situation. Good. The Brits, I think, were becoming more sensitive to the richness of continental literature and theory. They were slowly learning that there was a whole world out there, an Aladdin's cave of theoretical stuff. Moreover, it feels very European. There's something charmingly exotic about it. And if you're an Anglo-Saxon social worker, I think it would have been quite refreshing to read some of these articles, some of these papers about social pedagogy. Finally, and an additional reason, don't forget, this is the time of Erasmus. Erasmus is what, 30 years established now. And over those 30 years or 32 years, there's been a huge amount of exchange, and practitioners, lecturers coming from Europe, coming from places like Germany or Denmark, they'll be going to the UK and they'll be telling the UK students about their traditions. And I think that's selling social pedagogy well. So, big interest in the UK for a number of very good reasons. It's lovely to actually spend a few moments thinking about the etymology of the word. The etymology of the word, the roots of the word in our language. Thinking about the English word social pedagogue, well, it's made up of social and it's made up of pedagogy, isn't it? Social, our online etymology dictionary tells us, goes back to the 1560s. Look at this, living with others, pertaining to society as a natural condition of human life. So this idea that we had in our definitions, it's out there in the etymology. This is all about living in society amongst other humans. Good. Pedagogue. The term is a little bit misunderstood in the UK. Schoolmaster teacher from the old French pedagogue, teacher of children. Going back, of course, famously to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. In ancient Greek, the pedagogue was a slave who escorts boys to school and generally supervises them. And that slowly shifted into teacher in the course of the following centuries or millennia, I should say. Please note, the word pedagogue really does describe a teacher in the English language, and it doesn't really have the same meaning as, say, the German word Pädagoge. I don't know why not, but there's been a shift in meaning there. Be careful with that word. It's still not always understood. Pedagogy, the English word, usually means something like didactic in the German language, again, potentially leading to confusion. So if one of your colleagues wants to talk about classroom pedagogy, they're talking about teaching methods, not necessarily your idea of Sozialpädagogik. Good. Moving over to the German now, it goes without saying these words, Sozialpädagogik, these words which were current, not just now, but also 200 years ago. Of course, in the early 19th century, the 1830s, we had the idea of the soziale Frage, thinking about industrialization. That was a kind of pan-Northern European movement, wasn't it? So that's obviously a term we've had for a long, long time. Sozial itself, of course, used even earlier still. Pedagogic was already been used in its current form in Germany in the 18th century. Goes without saying, Germany, back then it would have been Prussia, for example, very, very rich history in terms of education, the earliest compulsory primary schooling, so this is something where the Germans were actually way ahead of their Anglo-Saxon cousins across the channel. And again, if you're a non-German speaker, please note, we've got this word pedagogic in German, something like education. It may be translated as education. Many continental universities have a department of pedagogy, rather than, say, a department of education. And this often houses social work, which is really, really interesting, quite illogical to Anglo-Saxons. So again, be aware if you're interacting, if you're German and you're interacting with Brits or Americans, be aware that you have to do some explaining here. There's a lovely book which I picked up, which describes the origins of this, by an author called Kronen, and that author established, it goes back to an author, Marga, in 1844. Isn't that amazing? So it really is an old concept, older than social work, it goes without saying. So 1844, this author Marga coined the term Sozialpädagogik. Marga was considering, look at this, child raising and education in der Gesellschaft, durch die Gesellschaft, für die Gesellschaft. So in society, by society, for society. Isn't that a fascinating concept? Child raising and education in society, by society, and for society. Takes us back to our modern definitions that we discussed earlier. What Marga termed Sozialpädagogik, that was also known as Kollektivpädagogik. The contrast here is with individual pedagogy. So, you had the two forms of pedagogy, the social collective form and the individual form. And that understanding, a kind of collective pedagogy, a community pedagogy, if you like, I find that really helpful today, helps me get my head around social pedagogy. Next exercise for you guys. I'm hoping you've got good instincts here. It may be interesting to collect adjectives and nouns describing good social pedagogy. Ask yourself, good social pedagogy is, and then finish the sentence. Natter with your partner, finish the sentence. Which words would you choose to complete the sentence? Good social pedagogy is, ... Pause here. Unpause. What have you come up with? I did it as a spontaneous, fun exercise. I remember hearing the word ganzheitlich quite a lot when I was a student, and I liked that word. So it's definitely holistic. It's looking at the person from every possible side. It's looking at the whole person, the whole person. It's hands-on, back to Pestalozzi here. It's hands-on, it's very, very practical. And this is a theme which is picked up in the English language literature. They're quite fascinated with the physicality within social pedagogy. It's social, so it's about the community, but it's pedagogy, so it's about education. You know, the etymology does help here. It really is a coming together of society and education in the broadest sense of the word. It's based on relationships, it's based on a good relationship, it's interpersonal, and it's about nurturing, fostering, helping the development, helping the growth, typically of a young person, but also an adult. I'm coming to a close now. Really my last question for you guys to think about: where do we see social pedagogy in German practice? You know, where is it? Where is it in our social work or in our social work training? Where do we see the influence of social pedagogy in our social work today? Thinking of our training, thinking of our practice. It's my last question for you to pause and discuss with your partner. What did you come up with? I'm hoping this is quite an easy question. When I played this game, I found many, many places where I can see it, where I can smell it. If anything, actually, social pedagogy has its fingerprints all over German social work. It really is everywhere. It would be easier for me to say, where don't we see it? It's in our language. So for example, we often use words like pedagogisch or even sozialpädagogisch. You know, these really are words which Germans enjoy using. The contrast is really fascinating. As an Anglo-Saxon social worker, I might say, oh, that work could be therapeutic. And I think that doesn't really translate into German. You know, you can say therapeutisch, but I wouldn't. And if I would use that word at the university, maybe some of my colleagues might say, no, come on, Magnus, there's better words here. You know, that's not one of our words. So you'll hear the word therapeutisch less in Germany. You'll hear this word pedagogisch a lot, or sozialpädagogisch. It's all over our theory. Our social work theory celebrates the social pedagogy tradition within German social work. So much of our theory is as much theory of social pedagogy as it is theory of social work. It's in our lecturer's background. You'll be taught by Pädagogen or Sozialpädagogen. You know, it's part of their qualification. In particular, when I came to Germany 20 years ago, that's how a social work lecturer would typically have completed their degree. Back then, you wouldn't do a degree in Soziale Arbeit. You would do your PhD in Erziehungswissenschaft or Pädagogik, specialization Sozialpädagogik. So, you know, really, really shaped higher education. That was your path to getting a PhD. It's in our law. If you look at your law books, you know, pick up your SGB Act, look inside, you'll see the word pedagogic all over those laws. For example, you might have a sozialpädagogische Familienhilfe, helping your family in need. And it's in our constellation of services. What is social work? The answer to that question, you know, the concrete services which we consider to be social work services, that's shaped by this pedagogy, social pedagogy idea. And a nice concrete example of that, the kindergarten system or the nursery system is very, very much of children's services in Germany. In other countries, they may be part of the education system, but for us, no, it's very much part of our social system, so to say. So in a sense, this idea of social pedagogy has helped shape kind of the position of the boundaries of our profession. What is social work is very much influenced by what could be social pedagogical, so to say. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this talk. Let's come to a close now. Thanks for listening, everybody.